be that self which one truly is. Wisdom is the supreme part of happiness. Purity of heart is to will one thing. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. Pleasure disappoints, but possibility never. During the first period of a man's life, the greatest danger is to not take the risk. What our age lacks is not reflection, but passion. Trouble is the common denominator of living. It is the great equalizer. Not just in commerce, but in the world of ideas too, our age is putting on a veritable clearance sale. Everything can be had so dirt cheap that one begins to wonder whether in the end anyone will want to make a bid. Adversity draws men together and produces beauty and harmony in life's relationships, just as the cold of winter produces ice flowers on the window panes, which vanish with the warmth. One can advise comfortably from a safe port. It seems essential in relationships and all tasks that we concentrate only on what is most significant and important. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. It is the duty of the human understanding to understand that there are things which it cannot understand, and what those things are. Human understanding has vulgarly occupied itself with nothing but understanding. But if it would only take the trouble to understand itself, at the same time it would simply have to posit the paradox. The self-assured believer is a greater sinner in the eyes of God than the troubled disbeliever. Philosophy always requires something more, requires the eternal, the true, in contrast to which even the fullest existence as such is but a happy moment. Far from idleness being the root of all evil, it is rather the only true good. People hardly ever make use of the freedom they have. For example, the freedom of thought. Instead, they demand freedom of speech as a compensation. The greatest danger, that of losing one's own self, may pass off quietly as if it were nothing. Every other loss, that of an arm, a leg, $5, a wife, etc., is sure to be noticed. It requires courage not to surrender oneself to the ingenious or compassionate counsels of despair that would induce a man to eliminate himself from the ranks of the living. But it does not follow from this that every huckster who is fattened and nourished in self-confidence has more courage than the man who yielded to despair. How ironical that it is by means of speech that man can degrade himself below the level of dumb creation, for a chatterbox is truly of a lower category than a dumb creature. That is the road we all have to take, over the bridge of sighs into eternity. It was completely fruitless to quarrel with the world, whereas the quarrel with oneself was occasionally fruitful, and always, she had to admit, interesting. Faith is the highest passion in a human being. Many in every generation may not come that far, but none comes further. Listen to the cry of a woman in labor at the hour of giving birth. Look at the dying man's struggle as his last extremity, and then tell me whether something that begins and ends thus could be intended for enjoyment. There is peace and rest and comfort in sorrow. It belongs to the imperfection of everything human that man can only attain his desire by passing through its opposite. Only when it is a duty to love, only then is love eternally and happily secured against despair. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. A man who as a physical being is always turned towards the outside, thinking that his happiness lies outside him, finally turns inward and discovers that the source is within himself. To cheat oneself out of love is the most terrible deception. It is an eternal loss for which there is no reparation, either in time or in eternity. Since my earliest childhood, a barb of sorrow has lodged in my heart. As long as it stays, I am ironic. If it is pulled out, I shall die. Most men pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that they hurry past it. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. People understand me so poorly that they don't even understand my complaint about them not understanding me. God creates out of nothing. Wonderful, you say. Yes, to be sure. But he does what is still more wonderful. He makes saints out of sinners. Love does not alter the beloved. It alters itself. Just as in earthly life, lovers long for the moment where they are able to breathe forth their love for one another, to let their souls blend in a soft whisper, so the mystic longs for the moment when in prayer he can, as it were, creep into God. I see it all perfectly. There are two possible situations. One can either do this or that. My honest opinion and my friendly advice is this: do it or do not do it. You will regret both. The truth is a snare. You cannot have it without being caught. You cannot have the truth in such a way that you catch it, but only in such a way that it catches you. People commonly travel the world over to see rivers and mountains, new stars, garish birds, freak fish, grotesque breeds of human. They fall into an animal stupor that gapes at existence, and they think they have seen something. I begin with the principle that all men are bores. Surely no one will prove himself so great a bore as to contradict me in this. The most terrible fight is not when there is one opinion against another. The most terrible fight is when two men say the same thing, and fight about the interpretation, and this interpretation involves a difference of quality. How absurd men are! They never use the liberties they have. They demand those they do not have. They have freedom of thought. They demand freedom of speech. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. I divide my time as follows. Half the time I sleep, the other half I dream. I never dream when I sleep, for that would be a pity. For sleeping is the highest accomplishment of genius. If I were to wish for anything, I should not wish for wealth and power, but for the passionate sense of potential, for the eye which, ever young and ardent, sees the possible. Pleasure disappoints, but possibility never. Father in heaven, when the thought of thee wakes in our hearts, let it not awaken like a frightened bird that flies about in dismay, but like a child waking from its sleep with a heavenly smile. At one time, my only wish was to be a police official. It seemed to me to be an occupation for my sleepless, intriguing mind. I had the idea that there, among criminals, were people to fight. Clever, vigorous, crafty fellows. Later I realized that it was good that I did not become one, for most police cases involve misery and wretchedness, not crimes and scandals. Patience is necessary, and one cannot reap immediately where one has sown. Philosophy is life's dry nurse, who can take care of us, but not suckle us.